Okay, so um, today we're going to be discussing some of the ethical circumstances of the Challenger Space Shuttle tragedy that happened on January 28th, 1986. For those viewers that are unfamiliar with that mission, the Challenger was a manned spacecraft carrying 7 astronauts who were killed when the shuttle exploded shortly after about a minute into the flight. What had happened is there was part of the structure called an O-ring in the propulsion system that when those O-rings failed, it allowed hot gases to leak and burn through the fuel tanks, essentially igniting all the fuel and causing the shuttle to explode. We're going to be discussing 3 questions today. One, what could NASA have done differently? Two, what should Roger Boisjoli have done differently? And I'll explain who he is. And what do I, as a student, see in relation to being loyal to management and protecting the public welfare? And we'll discuss how that's relevant when we talk about Roger Boisjoli. So primarily, what could NASA have done differently? NASA was made aware of the failure of the O-ring as early as November 1981, even though the mission wasn't launched until 1985. They did implement design changes to solve those problems, which is all you could really expect from them. But let's just say that the problems, or that the solves for those problems were outsourced, and they found out eventually that insufficient testing was done on those O-rings to give clear data on how they would perform in the weather conditions that they were going to be facing during the Challenger launch. I believe once that data was shown to them that, hey, we do not have sufficient data to know what's going to happen in these type of conditions, at that point NASA should have postponed the launch, right? Effectively what they kind of said was, well, we don't know what's going to happen, right? We can't say for sure it's going to fail or for sure it's going to be a bad thing. So, quote unquote, let's risk it. I think that the reason why they had done that at that time, and I can't speak to, their motivations, but I understand that there was economic motivations with funding, political motivations with competing with Russians, among other things. However, they did take a risk, essentially. They looked at the data, said, we don't know what's going to happen, let's try it. And unfortunately, people lost their lives because of it. Two, what should Roger Boisjoli have done differently? So just to explain who he is, he was one of the front line engineers working on the O-ring, and he had observed and brought this data to both his managers and NASA management. One case, they had a call the night before the launch just to discuss this, and he had strongly recommended that they postponed due to the fact that they had tested these O-rings in not as cold weather, but still cold weather, and they had corroded, which wasn't a good sign, which could cause them to not sit well, balloon, and hot gases to escape. So he told that to them and said that this happened in, let's just say, this is arbitrary, but let's say this happened in 40-degree weathers. It's 20 degrees today, so probably not a good idea to do this. Engineers at NASA, managers at NASA questioned his logic, and effectively what ended up happening was they went back, reconvened internally. At that point, I'm sure he had pressured by his managers to change his mind or to kind of go with it, but he kind of stuck by his guns, and he even asked his managers, like, don't let this happen, like, don't let this launch. Eventually, let's just call it mid-level management, decided to go ahead and change the recommendation regardless of what the front-end users were seeing, and that ended up in disaster. So I don't recommend that he should have done anything different. I think that he risked a lot in terms of his family, right? Because he went against his leaders, and people cannot like that sometimes. So he essentially risked his livelihood and his family's safety to do that. But that's an admirable quality. And just kind of how do I see professional responsibilities in relation to both loyalty to management and protecting public welfare? I think you just simplify it, right? I think that if you're going to be loyal to management, that's a good quality, but it should never supersede loyalty or honesty to the public at large. I think if you do that, in effect, you're trading your integrity for money or clout or whatever lesser attribute that it is, which in the end is just a bad investment for you personally. So anyway, that's my thoughts. This is Tech 10, 1010. I'm Connor Maluch. Thanks.